Today's podcast is sponsored by my new favorite animated TV show, Tuttle Twins, the first cartoon series to teach kids principles of freedom, economics, and liberty, and to be funny in the process. Nowadays, hidden political agendas are constantly forced on your kids in entertainment and in schools. Tuttle Twins is a hilarious cartoon series that teaches kids about the principles of freedom without being overly preachy. It's educational and hilarious, and there are lots of jokes for adults too. The best part, you can watch Tuttle Twins entirely for free. Just go to TuttleTwins.tv, that is Tuttle Twins, TuttleTwins.tv, and over there you can watch all of the episodes for free. One more time, that's TuttleTwins.tv. Highly recommend it. Go check it out. What's up, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls around the world? I would like to welcome you back to another episode of the Real Talk with Zuby podcast. Now, today's conversation is going to be very interesting. We are going to be talking about homelessness and housing, and who better to do that with than Tyler Alvarez, who is from San Diego. He has been working in this area for a couple of years and has got some interesting insights, which he's going to be sharing with us. So welcome to the show, Tyler.
Hey, Zuby, thanks for having me, man. Yeah, I can't wait to elaborate on my personal experience. So yeah, thanks for having me.
No doubt, bro. Happy to have you here. So I've done a brief intro right there, but tell people a little bit more about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, I'm a 28-year-old living in San Diego. Before this, I was living in Ventura County. If you know California, it's about a 2-hour drive downwards towards the coast. And so when I was in college, I was doing a lot of homeless outreach, and I got involved with my school student government, where I became the chief of staff there. And part of that was to do community and university outreach. So I found through community and university outreach, there's a homeless problem, right? There's a homeless problem in university and in the city that I was living in. I was living in Oxnard, California at the time. So just kind of something I wanted to do was gather some of my constituents from student government and friends and whoever may be willing. I did some social media pushing to kind of, shed some love and show our city some love by feeding, clothing homeless people, just by simply bringing them food and clothes. But then when I moved to San Diego, I got a little more intricate with the whole idea of housing and homelessness. So what that meant was I joined a nonprofit organization. It was called PATH, People Assisting the Homeless. And what their philosophy is to combat homelessness is called housing first. I can go into what that looks like and what that means. But that's a little bit of background of how I got into it and where I'm at now with it.
Awesome. So before we go into some of the details of that, tell me a little bit more about your own background and story. What was it that even led you to want to get involved in all this?
Yeah, sure. So I come from a dad who came from Mexico and a mom who came from Canada. Both immigrated over here with their families. So they never really had the full college experience. So I was the first of the family to get that experience and all that. So coming from a background where, we were trying to make it work and really trying to get through the, American society, American lifestyle, I quickly got into touch with a lot of people who were on hard times, right? So I was introduced to the homeless issue with a sense of compassion, right? I came from it from like, man, these people are just down to luck. Look at the increase in unemployment rates. Look how high housing is. Look how the cost of everything, right? It's obvious how people get into homelessness. But getting into PATH and that organization, I learned that those isn't always the story. But just really my story would be just, living in the cities I lived in, getting to know the community. I was a latchkey kid, so I was always walking around the cities, going to boys and girls clubs and all that kind of stuff. So I really got intricate with it and got to know it well on a different level than, you see on social media or on TV. I really got down and dirty with it, if you will. Yeah, that's kind of where it started. I just had a compassionate mindset at first that kind of turned into a realistic realm as it grew on. So, yeah.
That's awesome, man. And when you joined this organization,
Yeah.
PATH, how long were you working with them for, first of all?
Yeah, for about 1 year and 4 months. So right when the pandemic hit, I was already working them with a year, and then I continued through the pandemic for about 3 years until making a change. So I would say about a year and 3 months of really getting to know housing policy and getting to know my city of San Diego at that time. So yeah, about a year and some change.
And what were some of the key things that you learned, or some of the key takeaways from that?
Yeah, man. Well, you go from little Oxnard, which is not big on the grand scheme of things. And you come to a bigger city like San Diego, you just see the increase in numbers. Obviously, at first, it's just a numbers game. Obviously, when you go to a denser population, there's more chance for homelessness and seeing that. Yeah, when I came into San Diego, I realized like the issue's much bigger, and a lot of the policy around it didn't match what was I was seeing on the street. Like the need for direct services, whether that be drug, mental health, or finding job. It didn't seem that there was a connect between the people living on the street and the people providing the services and the policies out there on the grand scale. So I noticed that through my own walking arounds. And then when I decided to get into the housing first policy to see what it's about, that's when I really got hit hard with what the issue was.
And what was that issue?
Yeah, the issue was if you give someone housing and hope that their mental health crisis, the drug issue, or that they'll find a job will just suddenly happen, it doesn't. Because we do provide general services. Most nonprofits in the housing first sector do provide Uber lifts to get to job appointments, housing appointments, all that kind of stuff. They give all sorts of demos on how to do general housing things to make sure you can sustain housing and be a suitable tenant. And it still seemed like just throwing them into housing, offering these general services on like a hands-off basis, like, hey, we offer these on site. If you want to come, great. If not, that's up to you. It seemed like it was more of like a throw them in the house and hopefully everything kind of figures itself out. And after me personally, housing over 50 people and seeing all of them come back to the streets, man, honestly, come back to the streets with the same issues that they were having prior to being housed, I was like, well, I was given this bill of goods that if you put someone in housing, they'll just figure it out. It's easier. But I saw firsthand how it doesn't happen like that.
What was it that was causing them to return to the streets after having housing?
I think so. One of the glaring issues that I realized that you put in some effort finding housing, and during that time, you'll get your phone calls returned by your client. No, they'll be interested. They'll be willing. They want to they want to get that housing. They want to be off the streets, if you will. So you go into it like, oh, okay, we got someone who's ready, who's willing. Da, da, da. But then when you get them into housing, you really start realizing like they do not answer phone calls. They're not willing to go to job fairs. When we broach the subject of drugs, they always come at it with, I have no issue. When, I've taken them on many housing appointments and seen firsthand, they'll come to the appointment on drugs, drunk, whatever it may be.
Mm.
And I wasn't given the full reign to be like, hey, we're not going to do this appointment today because of, you didn't decide to come correct. Correct. So
Mhm.
we need to take another day. But I didn't have that ability because we were hands off. We were, this is a personal problem. People with drug issues, mental health issues, like, we don't want to mess with that too much. We want to get them into housing so we can show, our donors that we checked that box. We housed them.
Mm.
We did what we said we were going to do. Now the rest is like, well, I hope they get fixed, and it just didn't happen that way.
And so I just want to be clear on this. So they were
Yeah.
returning to the streets so that they could continue to indulge in those
Yeah.
addictions. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, so when we gave housing, we didn't say you needed to be clean, sober to continue to receive, you know, general services. So it wasn't like we were
Mhm.
doing monthly check-ins, like, hey, how's the drug issue going? How's the job search going? Nothing like that. So they took it as, I mean, and it seemed that way as a free ride, right? Like, hey, we're going to put you up for 9 months. You know what you need to do. You know why you're homeless, right? And if that was the case, then you would think that person would have taken some sort of steps the years prior before coming to our organization, right? So you saw that and you went, okay, they've been homeless for 10 years. They've been through the housing first cycle for multiple different organizations. They've come to us and they're doing this again. We know the other organizations they've been to. We've seen they've received general services and have already had rental assistance, but we're going to do this again and hope it works again. And it doesn't. So it's a
Mhm.
vicious cycle that greases the pockets of, I mean, so many people and property managers that, I mean, they just don't deserve that money and that consistent business from our organization because we're trying to help, the people who are downtrodden. So
I hear
yeah,
that. So this
yeah.
organization, is it a charity or is it government related?
It's a nonprofit that was getting city and state contracts, right? So,
Okay.
and they'd be private as well. So maybe they found a donor who was interested in doing, building a housing structure. Like, perfect, match with us. We do housing first. You can build a structure. You can get paid, and then
Mhm.
we'll get people into your units, and we got a whole deal. And I didn't see that at first. I saw it as, look at these developers. They're trying to just build some homes, affordable housing for the people who need it the most in the city. When
Mm.
it's like, well, there's a whole lot more that goes into what does it look like to build a whole structure? How many units goes into that? How much city, state funding is going into that? How many people are we paying to make sure that building doesn't go to complete crap within a 30-day, a year, whatever it may be? So
Mhm.
there's so many more layers to that problem that when you just house someone and go, oh, look, we're good, you they get lost in the shuffle, in the system, whatever words you want to, put on it.
I get that. So it seems like, I guess, almost looking at it from a business perspective is
Yeah,
perhaps people are even looking at the wrong success metrics, right? So the success
totally.
metrics shouldn't be just getting someone in housing. It should be, okay, where is this person within a year or 2 years or whatever time frame, to see if doing that actually gave them a step up on the ladder to go on and become more self-sustaining. So
Right.
that's how that's what it looks like to me. So on one hand, on paper, it's looking like, okay, cool. Look, we got this many people in housing. We
Hmm.
got this much. But if in the long term, a large number of those people are just returning back to the street and their old habits, then or they never even stopped those habits to begin with,
Hmm.
then of course it's not going to be successful. And if
Right.
anything, you'll have certain people who are profiting off that, landlords, etc.
Big time.
It sounds like good business for them, but
Hmm.
ultimately it's not helping the right people.
Yeah, man, you're you're a quick learner, Zuby. That's pretty much, brother, what I came to by the end of my time there. It seemed like it was a the word I like to use is homeless industrial complex, man. It
Mm,
was, you know what I'm saying? So we're there. We put out these big promotions. They're pushing social media. They're LinkedIn, yada yada, all these things. Where it's like, look what we're doing. We're trying to get our most vulnerable on the streets housed. Isn't that good? Doesn't an organization need more funding to do this? You already know everyone doesn't have housing. Everyone's paying so much for housing, yada yada. They prey on those little key points that everyone can kind of agree with, and then they go, hey, look, we're going to do a data point where it just shows that when we house them, they're good. They're fudging the numbers essentially. I mean, maybe
mhm,
not. I didn't know the back end of path to the legitimate point of where they were giving over to state, local, whatever it may be. I didn't know the data that was there, but from what I know and the data that I was told to give every month to my lead was to show how many did you house and how much did it cost our organization to house them and how much will it cost for 9 months, so we
mhm.
can show the state, the city, hey, this is how much it's going to cost to house one person, not
And
not
how much does it cost to house one person for 9 months?
so for San Diego, I don't have a good number, but I know for LA, and if you can you can drop that number down by a little bit. It's
Mhm.
in the range of $750,000 to $850,000,
Per person?
yes,
Wait,
depending. Right, I get a
wait,
lot of like this when I
wait.
say this.
What?
Because like you said earlier too, Zuby. When you're looking at the cost of building housing, paying people to stay there and watch the homeless individuals and make sure nothing, all that. It's a cumulative cost that isn't just, hey, we built that rental apartment there and that's how much. No, no, no. It's a whole system that then equals a value, which comes out to one of those numbers that I just gave you. And that, I mean, if you look at how much we're spending on students, it's ridiculous how low we pay on students compared to homeless individuals, and
Mm.
there's a disconnect there.
My mind is blown by that number. I mean, if
Yeah,
you'd said 75,000, I would have been like, man, that
that's
sounds
high.
high. 750,000. I'm like, you're talking, that's like $1 million a year.
Yeah,
If it's
we're looking at
750,000 for 9 months.
right. No, so 750,000 to get them housed, right? So
Yeah.
that would be the whole we're looking at. So when you house them, they're doing the numbers for what's it going to look like after a rental system's done. So
Yes.
that's like the encompassing value, not just like 1 month, two. You know what I'm saying?
Gotcha.
So
Yeah.
it's the encompassing value. Yeah, but one person who really got me onto these numbers and to the statistics of it all, because I was more on the sense to feel like I was on the streets with it.
Hmm.
Michael Schellenberger. I don't know if you've seen the Joe Rogan. Yeah, so
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
he
I'm
had
gonna
one.
have him on my podcast in the future.
Awesome, awesome.
Yeah.
He just had one today, but I think there was another one a while back, and that's what really sparked me to dude, dive deep into what numbers are and into what it looks like when you're looking at cost. Because when you look at the human element, you'll get lost in the sauce, in the sense of like, man, like, oh yeah, it's hard. I mean, these people can't kick drugs. I mean, they've been doing it for years. It's tough. Like the job market is tough. Yeah, it all makes sense. But Michael Schellenberger really actualized it for me and made it seem
Yes.
like we are doing almost everything we can, but this housing first thing is not working. And me living it, it's not working.
So before we move on, so you said you helped to house 50 people during your time there. Is that
Yeah, rough
correct?
number, give or take.
Okay.
Yep.
Approximately what percentage of those people got their
hmm
act together versus
hmm
did not, or at least in the short term?
I don't want to do scare tactics and all that and come on here to do
Mm-hmm.
some crazy numbers, but honestly, I had one woman who really got her act together because, and I like to give this story because she found her why, and her why was her children. She
Mm-hmm.
had 5 boys and a fully autistic daughter, and
Mm.
she was the single mother. Her husband stayed back at the state they lived in, and she came to San Diego hoping to get this housing first service, right? So
Okay.
people are coming from different states to come to San Diego, California specifically,
Mm-hmm.
to get this type of assistance. So she came in, but she came in on fire,
Okay.
ready to change her life, ready to do it all. And what I found out was there was no, as Michael Schellenberger says, carrot or stick. It was just simply she saw the human suffering of her children, and she didn't want to be a part of that. So
Mm.
every time we would go to a housing appointment or whatever, we did a face-to-face meeting. She brought her kids, and at first I was like, this isn't conducive. But then I realized it makes her sit back and realize this is what I'm doing for.
Mm.
This is why I'm here. This is why I'm talking to this 24-year-old kid, letting him tell me, I mean, she's probably seen so much life, and you have me sitting there like, well, you need to do this and you need to do
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
like, you know what I'm saying? So that was one of the success stories. But going back to your initial question, brother, I mean, 85, 90% of them all had some serious drug issue or some serious
Mm.
mental health issue that sparked from a drug issue that just never got taken care of. And then when they came into our organization, it was kind of not enable's not the good word, but I mean, almost enabled because they just
Yeah.
we gave them a house and it was like, fix it, figure it out.
Yeah. Well, it's compassion is a complicated thing,
It is.
and it manifests differently in different people, and
Mm-hmm.
it can cause it can cause as many problems as it can fix, right?
Totally.
There's a form of compassion which manifests in enablement,
Mm-hmm.
essentially, or encouragement.
Mm-hmm.
You can see this when I don't know if you've ever watched those TV shows where you've got someone who weighs like 600 pounds or something.
Yes.
And there's
Yes.
always someone there's someone who's cooking them all those meals and feeding them and buying,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's someone who's feeding them all that.
Right.
And when they speak to them, it's always like, oh, well, I love this person. I care about them, whether it's their son, it's their partner, whatever.
Right.
And it's like, well, you're killing that person though, right?
Essentially.
You're killing them. So compassion can also manifest as a form of tough love.
Right.
This is something that if people get from their parents, fathers in
Mm-hmm.
particular, in many
Mm-hmm.
cases, right? Where it's like, okay, well,
Mm-hmm.
a good parent isn't a parent who just lets a child, says yes to everything and allows them to do whatever they want and always have
100%.
their own way, right? There has to
Right.
be discipline. You have to encourage the right behaviors, discourage the wrong ones, etc.
Right.
But I find that oftentimes people who are very high in compassion, whilst they may mean well,
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes they do a lot of damage with what they actually propose because
Mm-hmm.
they just encourage the bad behavior. They're too afraid to be seen as being, I don't know, harsh or tough or
Right.
whatever, to do anything that doesn't on the very surface level seem quote unquote
Mm.
nice. And
Right.
that seems to be a big problem. I mean, I haven't been to San Diego. I've been to LA a couple of times. I've been
Mm-hmm.
to San Francisco, and you know, Tyler, I've traveled to, I think at this point, 38 different countries,
Mm-hmm.
and hundreds of cities. And when it comes to this combination of homelessness and drug addiction and mental health issues, I have not seen anything anywhere in the world like I've seen in those two cities.
Yeah.
And I'm not the only one to
Right.
say that, but it's
100%.
very odd. I mean, every country you go to, there's homelessness, right? Homelessness
Yeah.
exists
Yes.
it's part of
Some form.
Yeah, just
Hmm.
like poverty has always been there, or
Hmm.
homelessness has
Hmm.
always been there. It exists, but in those cities, I just felt this strange. It was quite dystopian in certain Hmm.
Hmm.
areas in the Tenderloin downtown area of San Francisco. Obviously
Yep.
Skid Row in LA, but even scattered around other parts of the city
Right.
now. And
Right.
I was just like, this is so strange. Also, when you consider um, these are two of the most expensive cities in the
Yep.
world, not just in the
Hmm.
USA. These are two of the most,
Yeah.
when it comes to, highest living costs in the world. You've got people earning all of this money, etc.
Totally.
Um, and then on the flip side, you're just seeing this very desperate and
Yep.
alarming form of it's not the homelessness actually that's like
Hmm. Hmm.
particularly weird. It's the drugs and the mental
Exactly.
health problems.
No, you're hitting on something there. It's not. It's an obvious problem that we have people living on the street and all that, but it's what is actually happening. I mean, I've had the communications. We all look by and we're all, oh man, it's like look like they haven't showered in a while. Looks like they're on drugs or they're talking to someone that's not there. We all had those moments where we see someone and you're like, what's going on? But for me, it's like the enabling part, like you said, I saw, part of the housing first is harm reduction. So let me explain harm reduction to you. What harm reduction means is say someone has an alcohol problem where they, for the past 10 years, have been drinking 10 beers a day, right? That's just a general guideline, 10 years a day. So what Path said and what a lot of these housing first enabling nonprofits do is they say, let's do harm reduction. And let's say if they now are drinking 8 beers a day, we're doing good. They might be drinking still. They're not going to housing appointments. They're not answering phone calls that they need to, but at least they're drinking 8 beers a day. That's a win. Now you sit here and tell me how that is a win. Like it's just not. You just because someone is drinking a little bit we're still having the problem. And if you want to like look forward thinking towards it, you can say, hey, maybe that number will come to zero. But when you give someone housing and there's absolutely no incentive to get better, why? Why would they do that? I mean, that's the question I would ask would be like, so we have this person who's, manic every day, who goes into a housing appointment, ends up yelling at property managers like they know them or something, but yet we're still going to go and take them all across San Diego, down some of the most expensive real estate, or house them right next to it. I mean, people are right next to Petco Parkage, which is downtown San Diego. When you come, you'll have to come. It's a great place to be, man. But that East Village part of downtown San Diego has gotten so rough. This street camping is more than ever. It's more than ever. And like you said, San Diego doesn't seem like to be the biggest, on the map topic where everyone's like, oh, the homelessness there is bad. But when you live here, and and then for me when I worked in it, it's terrible. It's terrible, and the people there there's no sense of motivation to get out. There's parties at night on East Village, all with the tents there. Everyone's dancing. It's a it's a community, but it's a community of it's a sad community, man. For it just is. That many people want to have these kind words to say, but like I was in there. I've heard all the kind words. It doesn't fix anything to say kind words. So I've gotten to the point where you need to use actual harsh language of what's going on. And if you have street camping, that's not ideal. You tell me if that sounds like ideal. No one ever is like that looks like a lot of fun. No,
I hear that totally, man. Did you grow up in San Diego?
no, I've been a
Oh no,
Southern California.
okay, you were in
Yeah, Southern
Oxnard before,
California
yeah.
boy. I've been out here now for 3 years, going on four. So I feel like I've really I get to
Okay, but
I've gotten to know it
you've grown up in California.
all my life.
Okay. How has it changed over time? Because I'm not even American. I'm not from California, but a lot of people, even when I was
Hmm.
in LA, in
Hmm.
San Francisco, a lot of people tell me that this is something that has changed very significantly and really, really increased and gotten worse
Yeah.
over the past decade in particular, but even
Yeah.
several decades.
Yeah, the federal government put out a report in 2020 actually that shows, and they're looking at the dates of 2014 to 2019, and then I'll get into some modern times. But 2012 is really when the pilot of Housing First kicked off. So you give that policy 2 years to really get its hands and feet into communities, and you look at 2 years after, so 2014, right? 2014 to 2019, that's a 5 year gap, and in that 5 year gap, 20.5% increase in homelessness. And you go, okay, Housing First, the advocates, everyone said you put them in housing, you'll have less homelessness, you'll have more people working, you'll have a better society. That was proven and admitted by the federal government as false. And if you want to dive deeper into what America was dealing with during that 5-year span, a lot of the housing first advocates go, high unemployment rates, of course you're going to have high homelessness. Well, if you look at 2014 to 2019, there was actually almost a full 3% decrease in unemployment. So jobs were there and were able to be had. It just didn't seem that the people were wanting to get them who were in that kind of environment, because you see an increase in homelessness, but a decrease in unemployment. They're not directly correlated, but you see where I'm going with that a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
So modern times, since the pandemic hit, it has gotten so much worse. It has doubled in size in the street atmosphere of it. Specifically, if you look into Ocean Beach, it's a beach part of town in San Diego. Um, Prior to the pandemic, everyone knew that area as it being the homeless hangout. A lot of people went there. There's a lot of just drug deal. I mean, it really was just a drug scene in OB. And we call it OB down here. So when you get to that area now, prior to pandemic, you would see one homeless person to every 5, maybe 2. It's bad, but not great, not terrible. Now you're seeing 3 to 4 homeless people to every 5 unhomeless people. So it's like
Wow.
almost every person you are seeing is homeless or on the street. And my girlfriend lives there right now, and she's a part of the crime statistics, and she's seen it just skyrocket. I mean, it's so dangerous out there too. So she's now looking at different places to stay. So it's not only affecting the people who are on the street, but the people who are paying to live in this area. You're blocks from the beach. You have amazing properties. You have great restaurants, great everything. But then you just have this huge homeless issue right in the middle of it, and there doesn't seem to be any sort of fixing it. And the
Mm-hmm.
police, they're there, but it's like they're just hands off. It's a hands off. It's a full hands off approach, man. It really really is. So since the pandemic, I've seen it grow twofold. And if you're looking at statistics of when it started in that 2014-2019 gap, you've seen nothing but homeless growth
Mm-hmm.
strictly. So
Why? What are the core reasons for that?
I think it's everyone I've seen is it's drug addiction. It's some sort of drug or mental health issue. And when you talk to them, it seemed like an issue that was enabled by maybe they had friends, family members living at the time, that just got out of control to where they couldn't, um, make their own rent. Find a place with a roommate who would have them in a place with them.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever it may be. So it came to a point where they just ruined relationships and ended up on the street and never kind of found momentum.
Yeah, but what do you think has led to the increase? I mean, you pointed out a specific time
Yeah.
where you said it really, really started to increase, and why is that?
You there's a lot of it's like an onion. You got to peel it off layer by layer a little bit, and there's so many different approaches. But I think one of the main issues was this housing first, of giving someone who is a drug addict at the time, or has a serious mental health issue, schizophrenia, whatever. Let's give them their own apartment. Which then, if they have friends, and now they have exteriors coming into the same area, which
Okay.
then could increase their also homelessness. So maybe someone who was fringe homeless had a friend who went full blown homeless and went to the housing first circuit, and now they're using their services, and now boom, it has
Mm,
unraveled into multiple people, and then those people get into housing first also, and the cycle continues. So it could be that, but I really do think, when I've seen it, I've seen it too. So you put someone in there, they have, we all have friends at our house, but when we're trying to get you off the streets, and this is our plan for 9 months of fix this issue, let's focus on that, right? Let's focus on that issue instead of let's having friends and doing this and not answering calls. So I think having that environment for other people to come into as well really created this spill out effect.
hmm I know in Michael Schellenberger's book San Francisco,
Yeah.
he says that a lot of the drug using homeless people referred to it or compared it to Pleasure Island,
Yeah.
so that people
Hmm.
from it seems that with a lot of these policies, because this perverse incentive has been created,
Right.
and then I guess also, to be fair, California has some of the best weather in the
Hmm.
USA all times of the
Yep.
year.
Yep.
So you get people who are coming from other outside the state and
Hmm.
are migrating into San Diego, Los
Hmm.
Angeles, San Francisco to take advantage of the hyper tolerant drug policies,
You're hitting on the nose.
and also the incentives and ability to, as you said, I mean, it sounds so weird even
Hmm.
talking about this as a community, but to
Right.
join this community and
Yes.
atmosphere and to be with like-minded and like-habited
Mm-hmm.
people, and to be able to do this and know that they are going to be treated very leniently.
100%. Yeah, 100%. That's correct. I mean, because I've had people who, like I said, like you want to have a conversation with them, like, hey, we've now missed 5 housing appointments. You came in here to get housed. I have all the openings for you, but you can't find the time to like go see your case manager to get some drug rehabilitation. You can't find your case manager to get the Uber or Lyft services we provide to come there. So it's like this enablement, and then the issue of housing people and case management not being able to put some pressure on the person and be like, hey, like we need you to do this so we can provide this assistance and you can eventually be good. It was this full-blown enablement. And then going back to the community part that you were saying, I had people who I did house who would go, I much rather have my tent inside this house than be
Hmm.
living out on the street. And I'm like, you're going to put a tent. They're like, I'm going to put a tent in here. I'm like, you put a tent in there then. And it's like, you can't have a serious conversation of what psychologically that can do to someone of putting them in a home, but then reminding them of their old life and putting a tent in there. Right. So like you couldn't have real life conversations. We weren't allowed to. I mean, it didn't seem like we had that freedom. I had some rapport with some of my clients, but I couldn't be their mother, and we were not given the right to be like, you need to do this, or I'm not going to take you to see this housing appointment. Plain and simple. Like that was not an option for me.
I hear that, man.
Yeah.
It sounds frustrating. I can. It's frustrating as an outsider, so I can
Yeah,
only imagine for someone who's working within it,
it was,
and
man.
has had those personal direct experiences, what it must be like. So
Yep.
I think we've done a decent job of diagnosing the issue and some of the proposed solutions that do not seem to be working,
Mhm.
particularly
Mhm.
this housing first policy and the harm reduction policies.
Yep.
So let's talk about solutions.
Yeah. Yeah.
In your experience and observation, and even in terms of real life results, what
Yep.
is it that works? What are the policies and ideas that can be put in place that can help to reverse this trend?
Yeah. Getting this question, I always say policy is usually not going to be the reason why someone kicks homelessness, right? That usually policy can help, policy can aid, but kicking homelessness, kicking drug issues, finding a job has to come from that person. So a lot of this issue comes from self realization, self, having it be something that that person needs to do. So, but a policy that could be implemented, which I've seen for veterans, because that was my specific group, is shelter first, housing earned. So, having these shelters that are there to, let someone get off the street, so they're not sleeping on the street, clean the streets up of all these cities, put them in the center where they have all the services they may need, but making sure that we have this carrot and stick method, if you will, of we need you monthly to take drug tests, and if you do that, we can keep you staying here, and we'll continue to provide services, and we'll continue to do this for you. Every week we need you to go look at a job. We need you to go do volunteer services to be part of your community again. Whatever that may be, is having this shelter first, housing earned environment, I believe will then start the process of putting onus back onto that person into being like, I know, I mean, everyone's got to know they have an issue. I've asked them, they all know. As much as they pretend like it could be, they know what the problem is and what's going on. So if you can say it to that person and make them realize that's the issue, and here's what we can do for you as long as you work within this framework, I believe that policy could really go a long way. Give them a place where they can feel they can go, but you have to have rules at that place, right? You need to check in at a certain time. You need to not disturb the people around you. You need to have a drug checkup, because that is part of the issue why you are on the streets, right? So having some sort of structure that actually allows people to know, okay, I need to do these things to help me, but also to be eligible for these services that California is just openly providing to anyone, really anyone, as long as you can prove you do not pay rent or something. And we don't even do that great of a detailed check. If you're on the street and we encountered you on the street and we intake you on our program right there, that is what we're seeing. We'd have no idea. Maybe you are couch surfing. Maybe you are. We have no idea. We have no idea. So they get housing, and we haven't really done our homework completely on that person besides checking our little service provider database and going, oh, they touched that program. They touched that program. But other than that, we don't know anything about that person.
Mm,
So yeah, shelter first, housing earned, I think would be a great start to fixing this issue a little bit.
I got that. I mean, what can the I'm sure there'll be people listening to this, and I myself am thinking, and I've thought this. I'm originally from the UK, and
Mm-hmm.
with homelessness in the UK, which in terms of the drugs and the mental health issues, of course, that exists. But as I said, it's overall on average, it's not the level of
Mm-hmm.
um, it's not as severe
Yeah.
as it is in certain parts of California. But I often wonder, like, what can the normal, everyday, average person do to help in this situation? It's something I've
Mm-hmm.
wondered for a long time, and I don't really
Yeah.
know the answers. And I think it's a tricky one because, again, when you know that someone has an addiction to alcohol or hard drugs or anything, even if they ask you for money, it's like, well, if I give this person 10 pounds or
Mm-hmm.
$10, are you just going to
Mm-hmm.
go off and
Right. What's gonna happen?
buy something else that's gonna
Yeah.
mess you up?
Totally.
Does do you even need food? Sometimes there's people who
Sure.
genuinely need food, and then there's
Mm-hmm.
people who
100%.
food's not really an issue. And I think a lot of the reason why a lot of people don't do much is because they don't know what to do that will
Mm-hmm.
make things better rather
Mm-hmm.
than worse. So do you have any idea of what people
Yeah.
can do, individually and
Sure.
collectively within their communities? Because this is not just about California, right? This is
Totally.
happening this is happening all over the
100%.
world to some degree, but certainly all over the USA. So what can people do?
Yeah, so when I first got into the housing homelessness realm, I was just doing general food services and clothing, which it does help, right? If you find someone who does need food, does need a pair of pants, whatever maybe, that helps. But that again is it's just a day's worth of help, which is fine,
Yeah.
and that goes a long way for that person. But if you want to make long lasting changes, I truly do not believe donating and volunteering, as much as it gets pushed as that is the way you can help. If you look at where your donations are going, you'll be shocked. If you look at how much these nonprofit CEOs and big time bigwigs are making, you would be, I mean, shocked is not a good word. You'd be disgusted. Really,
Yeah.
you'd be disgusted on what these people are making and how much they get increased in wages when we see a 20% increase in homelessness, right? So,
Yeah.
what I think you should really do, and what I took on to myself through working for my organization, was getting involved in my local politics. So, ingratiated and wrapped in the federal budget. What is going on in Washington? What is Biden saying? What? But what you should do is get involved in your local city politics to know what policies are being implemented, pushed, presented, that and then learn about them. Because when you take a vote on like a housing first initiative and that gets put into play and you see San Diego become an increase, or a small LA, and you're looking like, we don't want Skid Row here, well then you need to get involved in the policies of it all. There's so many good websites. I can link you some after this for people to look up, but you can get involved. You can know what's being pushed. You can know who are the big players in the arena, and you can put some pressure on them. You really could, whether that be through
Feel
social media
feel
calling.
feel free to, if there's a couple key websites, feel free to drop them on the podcast so people can just
Yeah.
search
Okay.
them on their phones or whatever.
Okay. Sure. But yeah, I think really trying to find the policies that are going through, and seeing those players, those are public figures, right? So I'm not saying go harass them, but we need to let them know what we as city people who are paying our rent, who are paying taxes, what we want to see. What do we want to see in our city? What's going to be the change? Is and asking them, what does this policy look like in practice? Don't just tell me what it looks like on paper. What is it going to look like for a homeless person to be housed and to successfully be unhoused and permanently housed on their own? What does that look like? And if you really push them, you're not going to get a concise answer. You're going to get a lot of the progressive nomenclature of, it's kind, it's tolerant, man. Like it's what we should all be doing to just let this person get by. They pull
Mm,
on the heartstrings to make you back up and go, oh, am I being an ass right now? Am I not being sensitive right now to this issue, right? And you just go, you have to sit there and go, no. What's the facts, right? And looking into policy that gets you closer to factual information on what is going on in your city. So I think that's a great place to start, is learning your constituents, what's going on, who's saying what, and why they're saying it. Because a lot of
mhm.
funding can come from people who are helping that person push a certain thing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's such a
It's a
it's
shady
such a
world.
shame. Yeah, man. No, it sucks. It's I don't know. It's a shame, and it's also I think one of the issues there is when it comes to these policies,
Yeah.
they sound good on paper.
Right.
I think that's a problem, or they certainly don't sound harm. I mean, how can harm reduction? Who's against harm reduction, right?
Right.
Like,
Right.
you see what I mean? So
A
it's
hundred
got this,
percent,
yeah,
dude.
it's got this
Exactly.
title where if someone says, we're putting in harm reduction policies, nobody's going to go, no, 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 we don't want harm
Hmm.
reduction. It's like, but it's called harm reduction, right? And
Right.
it sounds so simple, but that is how people hear things. People just hear
Yes.
things and they don't really dig into it.
No.
Housing first. I'm like, if someone just says housing first, I'm like, okay, well, what's wrong with
Right.
that, right? It doesn't sound
100%.
like, oh no, that's a terrible idea. It's like
Right.
housing first. Okay, yeah, put people in housing, and then I think that's a big issue is what sounds good or
Yes.
feels good or what works on paper, even
Yes.
the way it manifests in real life now that it's been tried many, many
Hmm.
times over.
Hmm.
Um, it's not working. And I think human beings in general, and especially this gets muddier when you start to mix up
Yep.
politics with it and you start to
Yeah.
mix in
Yep.
voting and social media, all this stuff that people
Hmm.
are constantly jousting for status.
Right.
Is so much stuff comes down to people appearing to be doing the right thing and appearing to be doing things that work rather than reality and real world consequences. I mean,
Right.
look at the past 2 years we've just lived through. I mean, it's all about what looks right on paper or
Yep.
what gets votes or the way polls are going,
Yeah.
what people are seeing, what people are feeling. It's not about, okay, what's the real world impact of this? How tangible is this? What are the
Hmm.
downstream consequences? Is this really working? Are we doing this because politically it gets votes or
Right.
because it makes you look like you care?
Yep.
Or is it actually helping people? Is it genuinely saving people? Are we making people's lives better? Are we actually protecting people? Or are
Hmm.
we just doing all this fluff talk
Lip
that's making us
service.
feel good? Exactly.
Yeah.
And is maybe winning us votes. But when you look at the actual people impacted, it's not really helping them. And I think this is a huge issue we have on not just this homelessness issue. I think it's a big problem actually we have in the West in
Yep.
general,
Yep.
where we live in this age of, and maybe it's always existed to some degree, but I feel like we very much live in an age of emotionality,
Hmm.
and everything is about, it's more about emotions than facts and reality. It's like it's all about feelings and appearances and virtue
Hmm.
signaling. It's not about
Hmm.
real virtue. It's not about real impact. It's not about truly helping people and making a difference. It's just about feeling like you are doing so and
Yeah.
showing everyone else
Right.
that
You're
you're a
doing
quote
that.
unquote good person because you're also doing the thing, whether it's putting something in your social media bio or like,
Yep.
you see it all, right? And I think that's such a fundamental core problem that we are having because
Hmm.
it even also silences people. It prevents people from talking about these issues honestly. I mean,
Totally.
I think an advantage I have in this world,
Yep.
like quite a big one, is that I don't mind looking or even sounding like the bad guy sometimes.
Sure. Sure.
Right. Like I'm okay with that. I can do what I do because I
Yep.
can do this podcast because I'm, sure someone could take some of this and don't take some clip and go, oh, look, make it sound like,
Totally.
I or yourself or some,
Yeah.
oh, look, this clip shows that he doesn't care
Doesn't
about
care.
that. Yeah. And it's like, no, I mean, it's totally backwards,
100%.
but I don't, I've just gotten to a stage where I'm like, look, I don't care. You can call me this name. You can say this, you can say
Yep.
that. I know where my heart's at.
Yep.
And I know what my intentions are. And I'm not going to allow this emotional blackmail and manipulation to prevent me from at least trying to seek the truth. I don't have all the answers. I
Right.
don't know everything. That's why I love doing podcasts like this and getting people like yourself on because, hey, I don't know about I've never been to San Diego. I don't know about certainly haven't worked in housing policy and worked for
Right.
this
Right.
charity and whatever. So I'm like, cool, like let me talk to you and try to get a better understanding of the situation. And we won't have every single answer, but we can
No.
at least talk about it
Yeah.
and open people's minds and open people's hearts. And then maybe they can go, okay, cool. Like let's look into this a little bit more.
Yeah.
What's going on in my city? What's happening in my area?
Totally, and to really, like, reignite that conversation, like, light that fire again, because we're all just so, like, like you said, emotionally blackmailed into, like, "Hey, sleeping on the street it's kind, like, none of that." And
It's
so
not.
when to go off that, the emotional blackmail, like, the housing section of my nonprofit, like, we were in it and learning it. We knew what it costed to take these property managers to run this place, what it meant for their reputation if a homeless person came in here and just ran amok, right? We understood that. So the housing section, we all got like some of the real, issues with housing first. We understood it, but we'd go out for drinks or whatever and hang out and be like, dude, so and so is not going to get better by giving them housing. And everyone's like, no way. And we're all just like, but we got to get them housing. So it's like, it's this like silent killer that sweeps through organizations like this, it's sweeping through the
Mm,
west of being, just be kind and tolerant, and the rest is going to figure itself. And if it doesn't, at least you were kind and tolerant. It's like,
yeah.
how is that any sort of policy? How is that any sort of way of being? So part of my journey to why I'm here today talking with you too is getting that self, I guess, confidence, and to say like, no, screw this. Like, this does
Yeah.
not work. I'm not going to continue to work for your organization and continue to intake veterans who A, fought for our country, and now B, are being treated like whatever. And now we're going to throw them into housing and just hope it all gets better. Just hope.
Yeah.
So uh, just getting over that pathological altruism that everyone wants
Yes.
to
Perfect way to
be.
put it.
It's just it needs to stop. We need to
Hmm.
stop and get back to like, what does a hard conversation look like? It doesn't mean I hate you or hate that person because we disagree.
Hmm.
Let's talk. Let's get to some sort of middle ground. And even at the end of this, we still completely disagree. At least we talked. At least we
Yeah.
both got our piece out. And now we can, we have a better foundation to work with, and we have a better
Hmm.
grounds to walk forward on. Because right now it's all these like fluffy clouds and like flower fields, and everyone's just like, oh, it's no good. There's a homeless person
Yeah.
there. Just forget about it. Like, what am I?
Exactly.
It's too
That
much like
dude.
Disney.
The first time I ever went to California was
Yeah.
2019, and I went to LA. I was in LA for 2 weeks, and then I went to San Francisco for 1 week.
Hmm.
First time ever there, right?
Okay.
Um, and honestly, I
Yeah.
was I was shocked. I was genuinely shocked, and I say this again as someone who's traveled a lot and seen a lot of
Oh
things.
yeah.
I was genuinely shocked, and I
Yeah.
wasn't just shocked by the situation with these people out on the street and some of the activities I saw them indulging
Right.
in the open. I was shocked that people were walking around like this was normal
Yes.
or acceptable,
Yes.
right? I remember
Yes.
I was in San Francisco. It was probably about 8:30 p.m.,
Okay.
8:30 9 p.m. on a Saturday night. I was in the somewhere like on the edge between the Tenderloin and
Okay.
the downtown area.
Fun
In the
area.
park, in a park next to me,
Hmm.
like just meters away from me,
Hmm.
were I'd say 15 to 20 people doing heroin.
Yeah.
Just in the open, like just next to
Oh
me
yeah.
in the park, and I'm just there kind of like watching,
Yeah.
and people are just going about their business, popping into CVS or whatever, people going
Hmm.
getting ready to go to bars and clubs, and they're just walking past and I'm like, am I the only one seeing this?
Right.
Is this normal? Is this like, in the UK, you do not see that. You don't like,
Right. It's not
right?
that. Yeah.
Yes, there are people who do heroin in the UK, but they do it behind
Hmm.
closed doors. It's not
Right.
in, right? I was like, this
Yeah.
is crazy. I've never seen this. Like they're like, heating up the spoon, and I saw them
Hmm.
tying each other's arms, and
It's like, what is
but
happening right now?
I was
Yeah.
like, what? Like
What is happening?
yeah,
Yeah.
this is wild. I saw people just
Yeah.
like smoking crystal meth and so on. Like
Yep.
I was only
Yep.
there for a week. I wasn't, and I wasn't going out looking for this. I was
Yeah.
just like,
Yeah.
yo, this is crazy. And I
Wild.
talked to Uber drivers or talked to a few
Oh,
other
dude, I
people,
can.
and they're talking like people are so used to it. Right. And I'm like,
Yeah.
you should not be used to this. Like
No.
you should be, you should be
No.
like screaming at your politicians, or you should be
Yes.
like, right. Like this is not
Right.
normal. Like this is not
No.
normal. This is not
Not
okay.
normal.
This is not compassionate. This is not
Nope.
kindness. This is
Anything.
not, I'm just like, no, this is horrible. Like these are Americans.
America.
Right. That's the
Yes.
thing to me. I'm like, these are American
Right.
citizens, who, I believe human beings are worth a certain level of dignity and
Sure.
respect. And I'm just like, yo, this is not,
No.
and I say this as someone who's very who's pretty libertarian leaning and is like,
Same.
the state, the state shouldn't be involved in everything. But I'm
Yeah,
just like, yo,
I'm with
like
you.
I don't know
Mhm.
exactly what caused this and exactly how to get out of it, but this is
Yeah,
not good.
it's not it.
Like
Yeah.
this is not, yeah, this is
No,
not, this
no.
is not it. This
Yeah.
is not healthy. This is not safe. This is not good for them. It's not good for you. It's not good for your city. It's just not good.
No, it creates a unsafe environment for everyone involved. You like we were for God's sakes, our people like housing specialists, me, we're equipped with Narcan. Do you know what Narcan is?
Yeah, that's when someone overdoses and they
Yes,
inject
right.
it and it
Yes.
brings them back to life essentially.
Yes, and we got full training because we are a housing first organization and we are not going to force people to stop doing their drug of choice. We were giving extensive training on how to administer Narcan instead of instead of being trained on how to have a hard conversation with your
Mm,
client about their drug issue. We were taught on how to stick a needle in the arm to make sure they revitalize from the overdose they're about to have.
yeah.
And we were told, hey, when you do that, for the most part, you're going to ruin that person's high and they're going to be pretty mad. And I'm like this is like
This
this
is
is
the concern.
not real. That's the concern. We're concerned on them. We're ruining their high in the middle of a busy highway or
Oh
whatever
my
may be. Like we were told like you're gonna ruin their high. You might want to walk. I'm like, this is strictly madness. And the fact that we're paying this organization to come here and talk to a group of us about how to administer Narcan and not to ruin people's high, and you're paying them for it. Like, you see where I'm going? Like everyone's
Mhm,
getting the wheel is so greased with money, dirty money that like it's sad to see how many unnecessary dollars are going to things when there's stats when the federal government is just telling us it's not working. it's
mhm.
it's just not. So
Yeah.
these progressives, they can continue to push for this policy. They can continue to say it's working in San Francisco and LA and pretend like everyone's just going to turn a blind eye to it. But like people like me and you who are starting these conversations, it needs to continue. And I hope through Michael and Schellenberger getting on Rogan multiple times and
Mm,
pushing his message, people really start to go and see what he's about, see what he's talking about, and juxtapose that to what Gavin Newsom's doing, man. He's been
mhm,
ruining cities in California. He went from San Francisco to now LA. He's like just ruining cities. So we need a change of leadership, and it has to start with someone who has as much power as a governor of California. So yeah,
yeah.
there's got to be some.
Yeah, no, I think people need to be, in this and in everything else, people need to be willing to have these conversations and to
Yep.
speak out and to be bold and to be courageous. Because people are always going to try to shout you down, right? I get
Mm-hmm.
people who are like, oh, you're
I'm
not from,
sure.
you're not from, I get, of course, you're not
Yeah.
from here. What I'm like,
Right.
bro, like, or you're not compassionate. I'm like, dude, like, I don't have a dog in this fight. I'm
Yeah.
just a human being who
Yes.
doesn't like seeing people living in like I don't like seeing people living in squalor. I don't like
Right.
seeing
Like we're in
people
medieval times.
destroying themselves. Like,
Yeah.
I'm looking at someone and I'm like, yo, if they keep that up, they're going to be dead in a couple
100%.
months. Like, I don't I mean, you want to talk compassion? It's like, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
if I were a sociopath, I wouldn't even care. I'd just be like, okay, it's
Right.
not my city, right? Like,
Right.
whatever. I'm not from California. I'm not from LA.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what? I'm not even
Mm-hmm.
from England. I'm not even from America, right? Like, I'm just like,
Right.
yeah, but I'm just coming in and going like, yo, guys, like, you should
There's an
do something.
issue.
Yeah, right. Like, I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
if an American came to the UK and
Yeah.
there was like some huge obvious problem that's standing out that isn't as
Right.
bad in their country, and they're like, yeah, you should be, oh, you're not from here, so like you shut up.
Right.
It's like, well, maybe that outside perspective
It's
might be
good.
more objective and honest
Totally,
than
Zuby.
what
Totally,
you
Zuby.
are used to, especially if you've been living through this
Yeah.
for such a long
Insulated.
time. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think an issue as well is just the politicization of it all,
100%.
right? Because there's this
100%.
notion of, it's this binary split, Democrats and Republicans and conservatives and liberals, and
Yup.
it's just like, dude, I don't. When it comes to stuff like this,
Yeah.
like, yes, I have my political views more widely, but like, who cares? Like, this is
Right.
this is just a human issue,
Yes.
right? Yes, people from
Yes.
different sides may have different policies and ways they think will fix it, but really, you all need to just come together, because I'm sure everyone agrees that it's a problem. Look, there's no one in the
100%.
world, there's nobody who wants more homelessness and more drug
No.
addiction and
No.
more violence, and like, that's not a thing,
No.
right? There can be people whose policies and ideas potentially lead to more of it,
Right.
but that's that's a flaw in a policy and a line of thinking, but
Mhm.
the actual motive is similar. Like when people are able to get past all the political nonsense, you'll actually find that for the most part,
Yep.
most remotely sane people want
Mhm.
fairly similar things. They may differ
Yeah.
widely in the way they think is best to approach it and to
Totally.
achieve it and who should be responsible for it. But
Right.
I'm not seeing a lot of people out there. I've said the same thing to I've spoken to people on the podcast who support things like, Black Lives Matter much more than I do. And I'm
Right.
like, look, no one is out there saying that there's no movement that is pro cop killing. There's
Yeah.
no mainstream movement that's pro um like more pro more racism, pro more
Right.
people getting killed. Like
Right.
that doesn't exist. That's
No.
not a thing, right? There's
Mhm.
not a Black
Mhm.
Lives Don't Matter organization
Right.
that you're pushing back against. It's all a
Right.
straw man, right? Everyone agrees implicitly that people's lives matter,
Right.
right? Black,
Right.
white, Latino, Asian, like
Mm.
male, female, straight. Like, no, I'm not
Doesn't
seeing
matter.
anyone in the West out there advocating like, no, like
Yeah.
these people don't matter.
Don't
Actually,
matter.
we
Yeah.
want. It's like, no, it's not a thing. But
Yeah.
you people are running across this imaginary enemy almost, and I
Yes.
think that's a big problem that happens when it's like, okay, well, we're the ones who are fighting for this, and we're fighting against this. Imagine it's like, no, like those aren't your. That's not. There's no enemy there,
No.
right? It's just
No.
like, look, everyone agrees. Everyone would like to see this situation
Yep.
get better, right?
Yeah.
Even people who are not from LA, people who are not from San Diego would
Yeah.
like to see that situation get better.
Get
I,
better.
I know people even from other, you know, fellow non-Americans who have been to these cities and are like, man, like LA is such a cool city, but
Mhm.
like
But
this
yep.
thing is like, this is a real problem, or this is
Like the
getting
black
worse, or
eye.
what. Yeah, everyone would like
Yeah.
to see it get better, even if you're just a visitor,
Mhm. Mhm.
so I think this is a wider problem of these like, yeah, there are times where, people are really like ideological opponents, but I don't think this
Mhm.
is one of them. I think this
Mhm.
is one where it's like, you know what, everyone actually
Yeah.
agrees on the fundamental
Yep.
issue here and would like to
Totally.
see it improve. So if you can kind of put your swords down for a moment and
Yes.
just talk to each other and
Yep.
invest, or
Yes. Yes.
you know to use the progressive phrase, do the
Right.
work.
Do the work.
Like do some work
Do the work.
on this specific thing, then
Mhm.
I'm sure you can help a lot of these people, because ultimately you're talking about human beings. We're
Yeah.
not talking about we're not talking about anything else. We're talking about tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of men
Yeah.
and women like ourselves who we'd like to help. And maybe you can't help absolutely everybody, because ultimately they
Right.
have to help themselves, but
Yes, they do.
we can do something that makes it easier for them
Gets them
to help
towards that goal.
themselves. Yeah,
Yeah, and
exactly.
going off that, I feel like a lot of that California, progressive mindset is like they don't wanna be the first one to say the thing. They don't wanna be the first one to say that thing that everyone's like, "Don't say the thing."
Mm.
So
Then
in
you look
this
like the bad guy.
case, yeah, exactly. So in this case, I was talking to one of my progressive friends that I just had met, and I knew his politics, and he hadn't known that I worked in the housing first, environment before. So I let him know, "Hey, before I worked at this job that I'm at now, I did this." And he's like, "Oh, was that the kind of policy where you gave people housing and made sure that they didn't have to, adhere to drug stuff and stuff like that?" I'm like, "Yeah, we just gave them housing." And they're like, "That's good." And I'm like, "You have a minute? You have a minute for me to explain why that's not good?" And by the end of this conversation, they were like, "Oh, I didn't know that." And I'm
Hmm.
like, "And do you see how me explaining it to you in this way does not make me some sort of guy that wants to throw them in asylums and forget they exist? Do you see how what I'm saying here is rational and how it's affecting the city that we both live in?" And by the end of it, they were like, "Yeah, I 100% do. I
Hmm.
can see how it's progressive to just give them housing, but how that, eventually doesn't work." So I was able to sit down with this person who is a full lefty and go,
Hmm.
"Look, man, like this isn't working. Trust me, I worked it." So that
Yeah.
also goes to my point of people have these huge, broad opinions on these topics they never stepped foot into.
Hmm.
You're talking about fighting, you've never been in a fight. You're talking about homelessness, you've never dealt with homelessness. You haven't been in that arena. So it's like a lot of this pounding of the table and like stomping of the feet comes from people who are like, "Well, I heard so and so say it and I trust what they say."
Mm.
It's like, "Well, have you lived it? Have you gone on the street and asked someone why they're here? Have you, dug deeper into what the housing first policy specifically looks like?" Like, it's all about just like, I heard this thing and these progressives back it. So, and I'm progressive, so I gotta back it. So it's like I'm on your team, guys. Like, look, I'm waving the flag. I'm waving the flag, guys. So that was a moment where I saw the flag being waved, and I was like, it's time to be done. I'm gonna say what needs to be said, and it ended up being good. So I think that's a precursor. Like, people, like, have these conversations. If these people that you're talking with are your friends, or you don't know them, if they're a normal human being, they're gonna listen to you, and that conversation won't end up in a heated encounter. Whatever it may be. So I just say, have the conversation. Say the thing that you know you want to say, that they know they want to say. Just say it and talk about it. It doesn't make you a bad person.
There we go, man. And I think that's a perfect place to end.
Awesome.
Tyler, thank you so much for sharing your insights on this. It's been great to chat to you. Where can people find you online?
Yeah, go on my Twitter, man. I had a post about housing first recently that kind of blew up a little bit and got some traction. A lot of people have different comments on it. So if you want to get on there and join the conversation a little bit, follow me on Twitter. It's TY_G_A. I'm going to write a piece about housing first homelessness for an article coming out. So, if you want to, get involved and listen to what San Diego's got to offer, and from my lens, follow my Twitter, man. And that's where you can get me.
Awesome. Great to speak to you, Tyler.
Thanks, brother.